Good Monday morning, everybody. I am Angie Callen, and this is No More Mondays, the podcast where we believe you can have a thriving career or business and an amazing life on your terms. And what I do is bring you guests who not only prove that fact, but come with amazing stories, strategies, and resources to help you live and work more authentically. Today's guest is Patrick Griffin, a negotiator, fractional CFO, and somebody who frankly doesn't sound like a finance guy. He's the kind of human you notice on LinkedIn because he's smart, snarky, and willing to show up with some actual personality. I don't know what you're talking about. And if we're honest, that is rare in the finance and negotiation space. But what makes Patrick's story so interesting, at least to me, isn't just what he's doing now, it's how he got here. And after decades in banking, sales, and strategic finance, he hit pause and asked himself some really big questions around what else is out there. Now he's helping others learn to negotiate, not just for better contracts or compensations, but for better outcomes, better relationships, and better lives. We're speaking my language already. Today, we're digging into the art of negotiation, the heart behind it, and what happens when you stop settling and start asking for more. Patrick Griffin, welcome to No More Mondays.
Oh, thank you for having me, Angie. I'm very excited for this conversation.
And I just have to tell all of you, we had like a great 14-minute unrecorded podcast before we even got here that had all this common ground, from mountain bike mechanicking to, I don't know, there was about 10 other things in there that I was like, man, this would have been a great soundbite to record. So let's get it on the record and start off with this idea that, like, you clearly are not the typical finance guy. For any of you listening out there and not watching, we got a wall of guitars behind us here. So there's clearly a musician and an artist component here. So I'm curious, in this like not typical finance guy brand you've built, was that kind of intentional, or is it just evolved based on who you are?
Oh, it's so thank you for asking. It's completely organic. It's just who I am. The One thing I would say, having spent the better part of 20 years in finance, I never really socialized with finance people. I was drawn to them less than I was to artists and creative folk. And so when my wife and I lived in New York City, all of our friends were, singers, actors, musicians, and my wife herself is a very creative person. She's an interior designer by training, and the music is actually one of the defining characteristics of my family and my upbringing. My family parties on my father's side are centered around music, and we socialize for an hour or so, and then we'll just play music until the wee hours. It's really it's been a gift to me, and so I guess um, that sort of distinctive aspect is probably born more of the fact that I was in school and could not decide what I wanted to study because I'm interested in everything, and to this day I'm interested in everything, and so I chose finance because I figured it would give me the money to continue to explore those other interests.
Mm.
And along the way, I wound up, at least in undergrad, with my undergraduate degree is focused on finance, but with a minor in British literature, which is not terribly common for finance folk. So it's just, I couldn't hide it if I helped it. It's who I am. So.
I feel like the better way to talk about you is like you were the guy in finance. You're not the finance guy. Right. And I think that I'm glad you answered a question I wanted to ask, which was like, how did finance even happen to you in the first place? And it was because it seemed like a sustainable vocation for all of the other interests.
That's exactly right. So I started out studying, and this was ages ago, of course, this was 26 years ago, but I started undergrad a double major in environmental science and biology because I wanted
Yes.
to be a wildlife biologist, which I still want to be. And so it's an entirely practical decision, but I do love math, and there's so much about finance that I really do enjoy, but I'm also very happy to be a reformed finance person at this point. So.
You and I have way more in common than I thought. Because also, by the way, literally, Patrick and I met because we have the same snarky, fun comments on people's posts on LinkedIn. And so you're getting to like, you're on a first friend date in live here is what's happening. So you and I'm class of 99. We must be pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to engineering school for the exact same reason. Dad, my math teacher, hi Floyd, said, and you're good at math and science. Why don't you go to engineering school? Okay. I would have loved to just study environmental, but it just didn't seem as practical. But ultimately, and I think this might be an interesting commonality that takes us into the entrepreneurial realm, smart analytical people, I'm giving us both a compliment, who didn't have a clear career vocational draw as a young person. And I find a lot of times it's because there is an entrepreneurial undercurrent that creates so many interests. You don't have this hard draw. And it took me a while to finally get to that point that hindsight drew that conclusion. It sounds like you're kind of in a little bit in the same boat.
Absolutely. And for a long time I was jealous of people who had that conviction. I know a few people who knew from a young age exactly what they wanted to do. And there's something very attractive about that. From a, as you're growing and pursuing things, but I also have I'm at such a fun point right now, and there's so much I've enjoyed about the actual journey along the way, that I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I feel it's been a roller coaster. There's been some unexpected flips and turns and maybe some air sickness bags. But I also agree with you. And I actually even agree down to I remember as 17, 18-year-old graduating top of my class, feeling very self-conscious about the fact that I'm a smart kid with no like clear conviction to I want to go be X. And that made me, and again, this is like the maturity of hindsight making me remember feeling like self-conscious or almost lesser because I didn't have that draw. It was something kind of desirable, but now that I understand why and I've kind of created this path for myself, it kind of makes it all worth it. And so I'm curious in your journey into this kind of like thing you've created for yourself. At what point did you step back and say, okay, is there more? At what point did you look at this and say, I need to be asking myself some hard questions?
So I think I got to it pretty late, to be honest. And the reason I say that, so I've always, you know, I've always been one to revisit decisions and second guess and overanalyze and all of that. But I was very comfortable in the corporate world, because I liked the stability of it.
Mm,
I didn't necessarily know what the future would bring, but I liked, knowing where my next paycheck was going to come from, knowing that I got to dig deeper and understand this particular market or this particular discipline better. And then that stability stopped being there for me. And so in the finance space and coming through the pandemic and out of the pandemic, a lot of people have experienced that real change in security of corporate roles that we used to have. And
mhm.
once that disappeared, it also had a pretty dramatic impact. So what happened was I went up leaving banking. I went back to New York City with a, with a sister company, my old company that I worked with for 10 years. They're building out a strategic team. And so I came back. I was asked to come back. I was there 6 months and they said, "Oh yeah, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to do that strategic piece."
Mm.
So my seat just disappeared. Now, thankfully, there was a sales role. I had hit my quota, so I had a nice runway. I had time to figure it out. This was a little over 2 years ago now, and but that that stability that I enjoyed was gone, and it also it was shocking for one thing, but really wound up over time changing my risk tolerance, which wound up being very important. So I think I was,
Mhm.
in retrospect, I think I was probably quite risk averse in a way that would have made it difficult to start my own business, and then I essentially faced one of my top three fears. So I should also mention that for most of the last 10 years, my wife and I, we've had a single income household. It's been me. My wife was a stay-at-home mom, and she wound up now returning to working outside of the home last year. But I was sole breadwinner for a long time, and so terrifying, period. But it really gave me that kick, and that as I said, that change in my risk tolerance that allowed me to get up to all the nonsense I'm doing today.
I want to dig into the risk tolerance thing a little bit. I'm not surprised by that because that is typical of people who work in the like in a finance type industry. They're just, naturally tend to operate in the known and the unknown. How did you challenge that risk tolerance and get it to a point that allowed you to kind of step into something that is risky no matter how long you're in it, which is entrepreneurship?
I would love to tell you that I had this wonderful program I put myself through to change my
You don't have a
my
five
sort of
letter
risk framework.
framework, Patrick? Dang it.
Not even close. it was, I banged my head against the, you know, re-enter, finding another opportunity in the corporate world for a while. But I had a major gap in my enthusiasm at that point.
Ooh,
And that reads, right? That's hard to
yeah.
land a gig when you feel conflicted about it and don't have that passion that is really useful, right? So um, it was it was the least one of the least deliberate things I've ever done in terms of changing my
Yes, I
risk
love it.
appetite. And but it was a necessity. I'm a big person. I'm a big excuse me fan of challenging fears through education. I think that
Mhm.
learning is the antidote to fear. And so, as an example, when my kids are afraid of spiders, we go study spiders, and just try to learn a little bit about something and help contextualize it a little bit.
Mhm.
And so I ultimately did that. It just wasn't deliberate. And I learned about how to face that fear of that instability and that having had steady revenue for so long, not having it any longer. What does that look like?
Yeah.
And then I got to play with it a little bit. So I was fairly deliberate even while I was looking for a new corporate gig. In 2023, I was pretty deliberate about um, getting my head around what comes next, what should come next for me, and because I did feel a bit of freedom from having some runway from doing well with my sales incentive and everything, and I played a little bit, which is probably the only way I
Yep.
can phrase it. I was checking out what other type of work I could do with the skills that I have. And I even had an invention that I was working on. And it's a physical invention. Actually, it's something you'd be interested in because it's a tool for endurance athletes, hikers, and things like that.
Oh
Uh,
no.
and yeah, and so I taught
Product
myself
market
3D.
fit in this household. Here we go.
You would love it. You would love it. But I've got some bad news about it, which I'll get into in a moment. But
Okay.
so I taught myself 3D modeling and 3D printing, something I had no experience with. But my library, which all of my peers on LinkedIn know that I won't shut up about libraries. Um, I'm a library nut. I'm fortunate to be on the board of my local library with 8 3D printers. And so I taught myself 3D modeling, and then I printed prototypes at the library to try to do this thing. And then I found a program to figure out whether I could patent it. And unfortunately, I couldn't because
Bummer.
there's prior art in place. And so that's the bad news of it. But I'm still thinking about how I could do it differently. But so I spent 2023. I developed a bit of an open mind about what would come next because I was chasing that enthusiasm, the enthusiasm I had lost for the corporate
Mm,
work I was doing. I it's important to me to love what I do because it's just really hard for me to be good at it if I don't.
yeah.
So,
There's some language in there I want to pull out and give and make sure we highlight for some people out there. I love this idea of an enthusiasm gap versus an experience gap because everyone out there
mm,
is so obsessed with I took a career break. I have a gap on my resume. What the heck do I do about it? Well, a timeline gap is probably uh more easily overcomable than an enthusiasm gap because that apathy is going to show in your interviews. It's going to even show in the work, and then you're not satisfied. And so I love this idea of you almost kind of negotiated with yourself here to push a boundary of risk tolerance, forego stable income coming in, even though you had a little bit of runway. And you allowed, and this is the big thing, you allowed yourself to be curious for a little while. Learn, take action, fail a little bit. Oh, darn, I created this thing I think could be cool. And now it can't get it patented. But does that mean the world is ending? No, you learned some things. And I think that is the thing that most people in this world do not allow themselves or give themselves permission to do. They never go and ask themselves this question and
mm.
negotiate with themselves to give them this space to play.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And it's funny that you hone in on the term enthusiasm gap because I there's a chance I invented it by accident, or at least coined it for
You
myself.
can own it.
It it
Own it.
probably existed before, but I don't think I've ever heard it before. So, but that's what it felt like. It was just so deep in my experience at the time. And now when I look back and contrast that with, the work I get to do now, and that's how I feel about it right now. Now it's the work I get to do, which is just such a treat, such a privilege.
Oh, I love it. So, speaking of the work you do now, you play in negotiations along with a few other things. So, I want to talk a little bit about, the human side of negotiation. What is the number one misstep when it comes to negotiating?
Uh, Quite simply, people don't try. Is the biggest problem that people have, the biggest obstacle that people have with negotiation is simply not doing it, and not asking for what they think they should have. And they cut themselves off so that, if you view it as a negotiation with themselves, they lose it every time
Yep.
because they simply do not engage. And then, if there's another sort of common problem I see, which is the media mischaracterization of what negotiations look like. So
Ooh.
so it's we are accustomed to this idea of negotiations being inherently combative, uh, and antagonistic. And not only is that not true very, most of the time, especially in B2B negotiations, it's really unhelpful to have that mindset. And so, trying to put on, uh, this kind of sheen, or put this shape on the negotiation when it doesn't belong there. Try to be the tough guy at the table, tough person at the table. That kind of nonsense gets in the way. So.
You bring up a really good point, is that I think I've said this before. So, my mom but also let's say hi to some people, because my mom and dad are listening. My mom listens to everything. And in case Jim's family in central New York is right down the street from Patrick, by the way. So, Gail, if you're listening, he's in Fayetteville, stone's throw away, which is just was a fun little common ground we had at the beginning. But I think that I always think about, like, when I was a kid, if we had to go buy a new car, my dad's blood pressure would go up for an entire year before he knew he had to walk into that dealership, because of the idea that he was going into a win-lose negotiation. And I think that's what you mentioned, how we tend to look at these things as, I'm going to go in on the defensive from the get-go because somebody's coming out of this the winner and somebody's coming out of this the loser, instead of potentially looking at it as a relationship first activity where you actually both have the ability to win.
Absolutely. And not just that, the actual, the process of negotiation can be a value creating exercise where you uncover opportunities to provide value for one another and identify things that, and this is a crucial bit, that are low value for you but might be high value for your counterpart. And note, I'm deliberate about my terms. I say counterpart. I don't say opponent, right? Because they're not your opponent. They're your counterpart in a
This is
negotiation.
not a
But
courtroom, folks. Not a courtroom.
yeah, yeah. And so so that there is an opportunity to identify value. There's an opportunity to, really expand the value for all involved, for both parties. And so in that way, we talk about creativity, and is there's a lot of creativity in negotiation, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah. That's where, okay. And that was actually the next thing I was thinking, is like, if we are able to take us this less seriously, it doesn't mean it's not a serious, we're working on something serious, but there's a difference between taking something seriously and being super serious about something. And so, where do you see that levity, right? You have figured out how to add levity to these kind of, like, what we make heavy situations. So how does that, maybe like a little bit of humor? If you follow Patrick on LinkedIn, you'll see it. He doesn't hide it, which I absolutely love because I'm a huge fan of the authenticity. But how does that, like, the humor and the human component of that actually help in a negotiation? I'd love an example.
So the so it's my youngest son's birthday today. He turns 7, and it's something that we observe in the negotiation practices, that children are pretty natural negotiators, and parents tend to kind of train it out of them very often.
Yep.
But I have 3 children, and my youngest is a natural, quite gifted negotiator. Um, but
That's amazing.
it's amazing. It's incredible. I can't even claim it because I do try to train them, but I didn't train him in some of the stuff he pulls out, some of the rhetorical tools he uses. But he smiles through it the whole time, and he is playing. For him, it is fun. And so, and it shows. And because he's smiling and because of the attitude with which he approaches it, he gets more yeses from me. And my kids are like, well, that's not fair. You know, it's probably not fair. But
Watch and learn,
it
siblings. Watch and learn.
but yeah, but he put me in this, he framed this so that it became more fun to say yes than it felt important to say no. And I don't actually endeavor towards fairness for parenting because it's not a real thing, I don't think, but especially with different age kids, I think it's a moving target. But I so one example, he'll he'll he's good at framing things. So he'll say, "Oh, can I have two cookies or can I have one cookie?" And they'll present it as a binary choice. And so you might want to say, "Oh, you can have no cookies," but then you're like, "Well, one cookie sounds all right." And so it's just this. And again, he turned 7 today, and this is just a
And already
natural
knows the art of a
extension.
powerful, not open, a powerful open-ended question. Nice job.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so and little things like that. So he'll just keep at it. He'll keep asking until he gets a no. He'll keep asking and asking and asking as long as he gets yeses. But he makes it fun. And so I've learned a lot from him in that way. Now I've always made a point um of not having or I've not always. I have learned, I've gotten better and better as I get older about making negotiations feel more collaborative and thus less combative. But I've learned quite a bit from him about how to smile through it as well, and make it this joint fun exercise.
You when you said the smile thing, I smiled because I tell people all that all the time. I'm like, why don't you just smile? It just changes the game, and it's so disarming. But what I love that this childlike component here, because now I'm curious why, in your opinion, it becomes so hard for us as adults to ask for more, whether it's money, time, space, ownership, respect, whatever it is. At some point, that script flips and it becomes very difficult and doesn't feel as natural as it was to advocate for ourselves. Why is that the case?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I have a great answer for it, but I'm going to try. It's a very cultural thing, and the negotiation, the tendency to negotiate, proclivity for negotiation is a deeply cultural um,
Mm-hmm.
sort of aspect, and so it does feel like, at least in the West, um, so it's some combination of not wanting to look. So some people don't want to look greedy. Some people
Yep.
don't want to look cheap. Some people don't want to look just needy in general. And so then there's sort of the tall poppy syndrome, right? Of that some people experience, where they want to be happy with what they get and not seem like they are ungrateful.
Yep.
And so but this is something I encounter in the trainings that I perform with my partners at Table Force, and which is one of the companies that I'm involved in. And I ask people how they feel about negotiation, and try to bring them through the course of this 2-day programming to feel more comfortable and be more talented in negotiation, which we were thankfully quite successful with. But a few months ago, I was in Ohio speaking with a corporate team, and I asked him why he didn't negotiate, and he said because he doesn't like it. He had just bought a car. So then the car example, 2 weeks prior, he and his wife had gone to a dealership to buy a car. They paid sticker price. They didn't ask for any sort of discount. Broke my heart. And so I said, well, why is this? And he said, well, I don't want people to look at me differently. I don't want people to think of me in a negative way if I try to
Mm-hmm.
negotiate. And so I thought that was interesting, and I think that's common. But I asked him because I wanted to kind of disarm that if I could. Um, I asked him. I said, "Okay, well, when somebody tries to negotiate with you, do you think of them less?" And he said, "No, of course not." And I said, "Why are you doing that to yourself?" And so this is such a human thing, also for us, right? We judge ourselves, and I certainly want to do this. Judge myself way harsher than I judge other people. And
Mm-hmm.
so some of it is just that combination of fear and judgment and being
Yeah.
self-conscious and all those things. But smiling also gets over that. I mean, the if you're I think anyway, if you're smiling through a negotiation, I don't think you look cheap. I don't think you look needy. And if it's a genuine smile and you're actually enjoying, the conversation with the other person, I don't think it looks greedy. And so it's just this sort of artifact of fear, I think.
Yeah. I think fear is a great word to associate with it. And a lot of that is fear we've created inside ourselves based on a perception we believe people are going to have. And that just like completely gets in our head. And the smiling thing, I think, rolls up to a bigger picture of a lot of this is an approach. Same with we talk about that, and we won't go down this rabbit hole because we don't have like 79 more minutes, but the networking is the same thing. It feels people build it up to be this very icky thing in their head that isn't genuine because they don't know how to approach it in a smiling way. And so maybe this is a good time to give everybody a little advice. So if there's somebody out there right now who maybe they want to ask for more, or they're one of these people who always just is paid MSRP, right? And they go to the dealership that's 10% below MSRP, so they don't have to worry about it. But there's somebody out there who has either never asked for more, or more importantly, maybe knows they want to ask for more, but they don't know how. What is kind of a first step or something they need to know?
Um, Start small. So one thing I always encourage, and my partners and I encourage, is get comfortable hearing no. Because no, negotiators don't dislike hearing no. No is useful. No is a useful answer for us. But that's something that I really I think people don't like hearing no, and I think that people need to get over that if they can. And a good way of getting over it is just putting yourself in a position where you hear it more. And
Yeah.
so, and some of this is there's a component of this that I've stolen from a professor at Boston University who I'm really fond of, named Moshe Cohen. And I've told this story on LinkedIn before, but the short version of it is that Moshe makes his students go out and through the course of a semester, this graduate level negotiation course, he makes them collect 25 no's,
Yep.
and they have to catalog how they received it and who they asked and how they asked and all these details related to it. But I know a guy who went through the program, really impressive guy, and he was eager to do this. He attacked this problem. He got 223 yeses before he got his 25th no. Every single time he was told no, he was told yes 9 times. And so that for me it just shows how much is on the table that we don't get because we don't ask for it.
If you
And
don't
so it's
ask, the answer
incredible.
is definitely no, and you wouldn't have gotten your 9-to-1 response rate if you didn't ask.
Exactly. Why are you giving yourself a no? Let somebody else give that to you, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Don't make the answer no before the question is even asked, because I think that we're really good at that. And that's part of that, like staying small, playing it safe. We don't ask the question, therefore the answer is no. What happened? What would your life look like? Oh, Patrick, we hit a good one. What would your life look like if you got 223 yeses?
Oh, that's a good question for the chat. People should put that in the chat,
You
by
should
the
put
way.
that in chat. What would
Yeah.
your life look like if you got 223 yeses from potential clients? Yeses from job offers, yeses for a promotion, yeses to go to dinner to the place you want. Because remember, everything in life is a negotiation, even the lunch you're going to make for your kids, right? Man, that kiddo of yours would probably have 223 cookies, or might have 446. Who knows? He's really good at reframing.
He is. Yeah, it is transformative. It really is. Once you get over that and get used to it and just and realize how much is out there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think that is an excellent just reinforcement to say the answer is no if you don't ask the question. And there is a way to approach the question without being pushy, and bringing, clarity, curiosity, bravery, human, maybe a little humor to this, so that you can be, at least, even if you don't become comfortable, you can put yourself out there and lean into this idea of asking for more. It's a little bit art, it's a little bit science, but ultimately it's rooted in humanity. And we forget that. So at the very least, start small and smile. Negotiate what you're going to have for dinner tonight instead of just saying, sure, honey, that sounds great, right? Negotiate
yeah.
stakes that aren't money first.
Or ask for it. So my colleague, so the co-founder of Table Force, this negotiation training company that I'm completely enamored with, and a partner at. Um, he has what he calls the free car game, where every month he has this car payment for his wife. There's a longer story to this that I won't tell, but he has a target amount that he wants to gain in value every month to offset this cost for this car. And so sometimes it'll be, he'll negotiate for a large coffee instead of a medium coffee. He'll pay for a medium coffee, he'll get a large coffee, and
So
that's
he tries to pay for the
60
car
cents that
in
goes in the kitty.
negotiation wins.
And there's
Oh, that's
little,
brilliant.
yeah, throughout the month. So he keeps this running tally, and it's value, it's not money, right? So it's a game. But he makes it a game, and games are fun, right? And so
I was just gonna
this
say
is
he
another way to
gamified
do it.
it. And so
Yeah.
but in a way it is he's negotiating in fake money. However, what he saves actually has a net with the real money. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a cool idea.
Yeah, oh, it's great. And sometimes it'll be something bigger like a hotel upgrade, right? But it can be small, it can be large, but it's a muscle that he flexes all the time. And
Yeah.
so and he has an interesting experience because he's an American, but he was largely raised in South America because his father was an executive with one of the automotive companies and was down there. And so he was raised in cultures where negotiation and bartering
It's
and
normal.
haggling were all
Yeah.
really normal. And
Yeah.
so it becomes a bit of a superpower when you do it that way.
And it's funny. I want you brought up the culture thing earlier, and I wanted to go back to that because I work with a lot of coaches who will say to me like, I keep talking to these people from XYZ countries, and they always want to haggle a deal. And if you're somebody in America, you're almost kind of like offended by that, or you get on, you're like, oh man, this person's going to try to swindle me. But that's not what it is. It's culturally normal in a lot of other countries to ask. And I think that's an interesting piece that you have to remember in your cultural awareness who you're talking to, and don't be offended by it. If anything, work your muscle a little bit more, even if it's in 25 cents a day in coffee savings. I love that idea. Make a chart for
Yeah,
yourself and gamify it.
exactly. Whatever it takes to just develop that, right? To develop
Yeah.
that method. So
So you've mentioned Table Force a few times. Tell us a little bit about that, and more importantly, how we find you and stay in touch with all you and this great wisdom about negotiating and the art of asking for more.
sure. So Table Force, and we like to say negotiationtraining.com by Table Force because we own negotiationtraining.com. So that's a good way to find me. I'm probably most findable here on LinkedIn. So that's a great way to get me. That's my only social media, and I do my best to be responsive on there. But so Table Force is um, a company that's been around since 1997, is trained tens of thousands of professionals in something like 50 countries on 6 continents. It's absolutely incredible, and I am really fortunate to be able to work with them and be a partner there. And it's a dream come true. And it's a methodology that is very practical across industries. We work with folks from all different industries at all different skill levels of experience. And I have never, having had plenty of corporate training myself, um, I have never seen as universally positive a response to corporate training as I see every single
Awesome.
time I give this program, teach this program. So it's fun stuff, and it's a great company, and the Bill and Mike, my partners, are just wonderful, wonderful people. So
So that's negotiationtraining.com by Tableforce.
yeah,
So you can check that out. But you can also, if you're listening and watching here on LinkedIn, obviously follow Patrick. He and I are connected, and we will lighten up your feeds, I promise, with a little fun, a little snark, and maybe not too much seriousness that you will learn from. And if you're out there in the podcast land, you can find links in show notes. And as we kind of wrap things up, I want to give one more little piece of wisdom to either everybody or somebody out there who's listening and is afraid to ask for something they want. What is your number one piece of advice for them?
uh, so it is. I would say give yourself a homework assignment. So you've got the rest of the day today. It's Monday, right? Deal with it, but find a way to be told no. Keep asking for something that you think you want or should have until you are told no.
Yeah.
And then tell me how it goes. Please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. I love it. Uh, I'm thinking of the book Rejection Proof, or the 100, which is I think the 100 No's book. But I love this idea of like, go hear no on purpose, and you'll see that it isn't the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just get used to it. You know, learn about it. Learn what it feels like and stop being afraid of it. So
Yeah, stop being afraid of it. Patrick, this has been so awesome. And I so appreciate the reminder that asking for more isn't selfish and you don't have to fear it. It's strategic. And the big thing is you deserve to advocate for yourself and to step out of this fear, and go into these, negotiations. If that's a word that doesn't like make you want to run for the hills, you deserve this. Give it to yourself. So whether you're at the table for a raise, you want a promotion or a new role, you're looking for a fresh start in your life, negotiation is a tool to align, not conflict or compete. And you never know, the most important negotiation may be the one you have for yourself. So, what I want to challenge all of you out there is to ask yourself one thing you've been afraid to ask for, whether it's of yourself or whether it's in work or in life, whether you don't think you deserve it or you weren't sure how it would land, you're afraid of hearing no. Take a cue from Patrick, get curious, get clear, and try the ask. And I love that he said tag him in LinkedIn, tag me in LinkedIn. We want to know how it goes. You might just surprise yourself with the result. I'm Angie Callen, and this is No More Mondays. Big thanks again to Patrick Griffin for being here and reminding us that negotiation isn't about winning or losing. It's about asking better, more thoughtful, human questions and maybe smiling a little bit more so you can have a meaningful conversation and build the career and life you want. I'll see you next week for another episode of No More Mondays podcast.